"You'll get a registration at the dump," laughed the husband with his mistress in court, having taken everything away. But they didn't know what the wife was planning. The autumn wind, pierced by icy coolness, rustled the leaves of the maples, painted in crimson and golden hues. The city was waking up after a dark, damp night, breathing exhaust fumes from cars and the aroma of coffee from numerous cafes. Amidst the stream of cars rushing to get their owners to work, a minibus moved steadily where Megan was sitting. Her face, usually calm and open, appeared tense today, which was unusual for an experienced ophthalmic surgeon who knew almost everything about the complexity of the human eye. Her phone bubbled invitingly in her bag. Megan smiled. It was probably a notification from her online art course group where she had recently enrolled. Just for the soul. Medicine is one thing, but sometimes her hand itched for the brush and easel. What's more, Megan had even made a few friends there, with whom she communicated anonymously during calm shifts or breaks at work. Especially with Michael, a fellow student from the same course as hers. He was a true master of painting. A God-given talent. A gem whose simple watercolor paintings captivated viewers. Usually, in moments of emotional distress, Megan would also pick up a pencil and notebook and start drawing whatever came to her mind at that moment. Most of the time, it was some nonsense, but sometimes she produced something quite good. Unfortunately, right now, Megan didn't have time for that. And what drawing? Today, she had to undergo a very serious trial. Probably not the hardest one she had faced in her life, divorce, which would destroy a family that seemed to be built on a solid foundation of mutual respect and love, which had lasted for 20 years. Megan shuddered as the minibus suddenly braked sharply. Outside, houses, shops, and bustling pedestrians flashed by, the ordinary city life that now felt foreign, distant, and indifferent to her. Megan was 45. Until recently, she had thought she had everything: a loving husband, a son, a successful career. But now her world had collapsed. Donald, the deputy director of a large firm, had betrayed Megan with the same ease with which he once gifted her sweet words and expensive bouquets. It was understandable. Her husband, experiencing a second youth, had chosen a young and beautiful woman, Whitney, who was almost 10 years younger than him and seemed to be fully enjoying her new status as a wife. With a sad sigh, Megan exited the minibus and headed towards the courthouse. "Everything will be fine," she whispered, trying to pull herself together, but the words sounded empty and unconvincing. The foyer was noisy. People walked anxiously back and forth, talking on the phone and whispering, waiting for their turn to be heard. As soon as Megan stepped over the threshold, she immediately felt several eyes on her, which embarrassed her right away. At that moment, she was overcome by shame and awkwardness. Divorce was not an easy matter, especially for a woman who had long considered herself a faithful wife and mother. Scanning the foyer, Megan breathed a sigh of relief upon noticing lawyer Frank Barlow, her only hope in this difficult case. It seemed he understood her pain and sympathized with her like no one else. "Hello, Mrs. Megan. Are you ready?" the lawyer asked, meeting her with a kind smile. "Hello, Mr. Frank. I'm as ready as I can be," Megan replied, trying to smile. "Well, let's go." Courtroom number 3. "We have a few minutes to prepare," Frank said and led his client behind him. It was stuffy in the courtroom. Megan sat down on a chair and tried to distract herself by looking at photos of her son on her phone. In one, he was with friends at a cafe. In another, he was relaxing with them outdoors, having set up a tent by the river. Arthur was studying at a university on the other side of the country, in the field of computer technology. To her great disappointment, he couldn't come to court. He probably has more important things to worry about, Megan thought bitterly. In that tense waiting, it felt like time was dragging on for an eternity. Finally, the bell rang, and Frank nodded encouragingly. "Let's go," he said and led his client to the necessary door. The courtroom was crowded. Megan almost immediately spotted her husband sitting in the front row with a young beauty. Whitney was a winner. She wore a bright dress with a deep neckline. Her hair flowed down in a velvet cascade over her shoulders. She was laughing and whispering something to Donald. A little further away, with an arrogant demeanor, sat Donald's lawyer, Frederick Campbell. Megan clenched her fists painfully and took a deep breath. Now she had to be strong. To be honest, Megan Beecham, an ophthalmic surgeon with 17 years of experience, never thought she would find herself in such a situation. She tried to maintain her posture, lifting her chin proudly. Let him see that she had not completely fallen apart and could stand up for herself. In her hands, Megan clutched a leather briefcase containing the folder with documents, the certificate of her 20-year marriage to Donald. "The judge will start the session soon," whispered Frank Barlow. Megan nodded in agreement, trying to avoid making eye contact with her husband. Soon, the judge entered the courtroom, a woman in her 50s with an impassive face and a stern gaze. Her presence instantly filled the room with an icy silence. "The Beecham case," she announced in a deep, well-modulated voice, scanning the documents. "We are considering the petition for divorce." Then, pausing slightly, Joanna Carrington looked at Donald and Whitney. "Which of you is the plaintiff?" "I am," Donald said, his voice steady and calm. "And who are you, ma'am?" the judge asked Whitney. "I am his wife." "Or rather, his future wife," Whitney replied, trying to smooth over the awkward situation with a smile. "Normally, cohabitants don't introduce themselves in court. But since you're here, I'll tell you that Donald Beecham has filed a petition for the division of jointly acquired property with his ex-wife, Megan Beecham," the judge remarked in an icy tone and continued, "Well then, let's proceed in order. Megan Beecham, please introduce yourself in the established form and state your demands." "Megan Beecham, I demand an equal division of jointly acquired property." "Donald Beecham, what are your demands?" "I categorically disagree with such a division. But if it comes to that, I would like it to happen only at my initiative. Also, I don't want to pay anything to either Megan or our son. He has a great scholarship. He pays for his own housing and food." "Right, Donald," Whitney couldn't help but interject. "Whitney Charlson, I hope you are aware that by law you have no say in this process," the judge asked, grimacing. "Yes," Whitney said, "but I want to support my loved one." "Wonderful, then let's move on to discussing the property. Megan Beecham, please provide evidence of its existence." "All the property is registered in my husband's name. The apartment, 2 cars, company shares, and all the documents related to it." "Frank Barlow, do you have anything to say?" "Your Honor, I want to request the disqualification of the judge in this case." "We believe." "The request for disqualification is denied," Joanna Carrington interrupted the lawyer. "Very well, then I ask you to note that our side has no evidence of the plaintiff's property. By law, anything acquired during the marriage is considered jointly acquired property." But Megan began to speak. "Be quiet." Donald interrupted her. "I'm not giving you anything. You can get your registration at the dump now. That's where you belong, and you have no place in my apartment." "Stop clowning around, Donald," Megan whispered, embarrassed by her husband's outburst. "I want to remind you," Donald said through gritted teeth, "we lived in my apartment, purchased with my parents' money. But we renovated it together, and my parents paid back half the amount within 3 years after the wedding," Megan countered, "and the furnishings in the apartment are the result of our joint effort." "By law, the apartment is my client's property," Donald's lawyer rudely interrupted her. "I see no grounds for its division." "I dare say that Donald Beecham did indeed provide documents of ownership," the judge confirmed, "as well as documents showing that all movable property acquired during the marriage was paid for by his parents." Megan felt the blood drained from her face. She didn't know that Donald had so cleverly arranged all his affairs. "You've lived with your husband for 20 years, the judge noted. "Dividing the property is a rather complicated procedure that you should have discussed with your lawyer and your husband in advance." "I didn't know," Megan whispered, unable to hold back her tears. "I trusted Donald. I thought everything would go fairly." "Trust is certainly good," the judge coldly announced, "but in such matters, evidence is important. Therefore, your petition for property division is denied, and the marriage is dissolved. Megan felt darkness closing in on her vision. She couldn't believe it had all ended this way. Why? Megan whispered, afraid she would burst into tears in the courtroom. Frank Barlow gently placed a hand on her shoulder. Don't cry, Megan Beecham. We will fight again. We'll file an appeal. Trust me, we'll find a way. The main thing is not to lose heart. Megan exited the courtroom and found herself in the cold foyer. Tears streamed down her face. She was trembling. She felt defeated, broken. Meanwhile, Donald, under the applause of his mistress, demonstratively handed the keys to one of his cars to his lawyer. Thank you for the good work. It was simply magnificent, Maestro. Frederick Campbell smiled smugly. Glad to help. Contact me for anything. Believe me, I can do a lot in the world of law. Thank you, of course, but I'm sure I won't need your help anymore, Donald said deliberately loudly. The businessman's intention was clear, to let his ex-wife know that she had lost the battle. Megan pouted and, dryly bidding farewell to Frank, headed toward the exit. A court dispute is certainly a respectable reason, but work should not be forgotten either. Moreover, today she was scheduled for a complex eye correction and cataract surgery on a patient. Arriving at the bus stop, she realized that the transport she needed would arrive any minute now. Well, at least I got lucky here. As if to confirm her theory, a bus appeared around the corner. People began to cheer, having endured the chilly autumn breeze at the stop. The interior of the bus, packed with people, seemed tight and stuffy to her. Megan squeezed through to a free seat and sat down, feeling a cold shiver run through her body. Opposite her sat a young mother with a crying child. The little one seemed to sense her depressed state and quieted down. Megan rummaged through her bag in search of a handkerchief. Her hands trembled. She wiped her tears, trying to put a calm expression on her face. Then she took out her smartphone and opened the online painting course group. She wanted to distract herself, if only for a while. Painting had become her salvation in recent years. Amid endless surgeries and constant stress, she needed an outlet, something that calmed her and brought joy. Recently, she had stumbled upon this course and since then had enjoyed immersing herself in the magical world of colors and brushes. It was her little hobby, a way to find comfort in creativity. Megan delighted in the fact that each line and brushstroke could express what was impossible to articulate in words. The community included many interesting people, among whom Michael stood out. He was very talented, and Megan had written to him several times expressing her admiration. To her great delight, a new message appeared from him in the community. Hello everyone. I've finished working on a new study. I tried to capture the mood of today. I hope you like it. Here's the link. Megan opened it with curiosity and saw a canvas filled with deep shades of blue and delicate strokes of gold. Charming, she immediately wrote. I really love how you conveyed the light and shadow. Such tender melancholy. Thank you, Megan, Michael replied a minute later in the chat. I'm glad you liked it. I'm thrilled with this work myself. Today, I particularly wanted to pour my mood onto the canvas. I understand, she typed on the screen keyboard, sometimes colors are the best medicine. Today is not my best day, but your work has calmed my soul a little. And what happened, if it's not a secret? You seem a bit upset. Megan suddenly felt the urge to speak out. In this anonymous space, it was much easier than anywhere else. After all, no one knows each other face to face. Besides, the country is big. People write and share their work from every corner of the nation. I'm sorry, Michael, it's just that today is not a good day for me. Court, divorce, it's all quite painful. Oh, he wrote, I'm really sorry. I can imagine how difficult this is. But don't lose hope. Life is all about constant change. Some of it is painful, but it also gives us a chance to grow, to change, and to discover something new. I went through a breakup once too. It was a long time ago, though. We were only married for 5 years. We struggled to have children for a long time. I came back from a business trip a day early, and what did I find? A scene right out of a joke. Strange shoes in the hallway and a man's voice coming from the bedroom. I felt a rush of blood to my head. I thought I would break something, but then I calmed down. My wife explained everything. She was pregnant, 5 weeks along. With her lover, of course. I had never seen her so happy. Now they live in a happy marriage. Just like people do. House, car, summer vacation by the sea. Michael's story immediately sparked lively discussions in the group. Only Megan remained restrained and wrote, "Thank you for sharing, Michael. You're a very kind person. It's nice to talk to you," she sent, and immediately felt her face flush. Thankfully, it was cloudy outside, and no one could see her embarrassment. At 45, she felt like a schoolgirl, her heart racing with excitement. And thank you, Megan, for sharing your thoughts with me. I hope you soon find the strength to get through this time and start a new chapter in your life. I've heard you're a talented doctor, and your gift helps people see the world. That's priceless, in my opinion. Thank you, Megan replied again. Yes, I really need to gather my strength. I have an important surgery ahead, and I can't afford any mistakes. I understand. I hope the surgery goes well. Good luck, the man responded. After his words, Megan suddenly felt her mood beginning to improve. Deep down, she was very pleased that Michael was so sincerely concerned about her. It was evident in every line and every word. By the way, Michael, have you tried the wet-on-wet technique? She decided to change the subject while there was still time. Yes, a few times, but to be honest, it doesn't work out very well. It's difficult to control the paint blurring, he replied fairly quickly. Well, then you need to experiment more with water. Don't be afraid to mix colors on the canvas. And of course, don't forget about the palette knife. It will help you create interesting color effects, Megan enthusiastically typed on the screen keyboard. The woman with the child across from her shook her head disapprovingly, lamenting that gadgets would soon take over the world. Thank you, Megan, I will definitely try, Michael replied. Are you heading to work now? Yes, to the eye clinic, she answered. Interesting, Michael wrote, and how did you master such a complex field of medicine? I would love to hear about your journey, if it's not a secret, of course. Oh, in childhood, I was fascinated by doctors' ability to heal people, Megan replied, using predictive text for speed. Back then, it was just a child's dream, a desire to help people. As the years went by, this desire grew stronger, and I decided to become an ophthalmologist. It wasn't easy, of course. Many years of study and practice, but in the end, I achieved my goal. And now I'm an ophthalmologist. Oh, a true role model. Michael wrote with admiration. You're a doctor, and at the same time, you have such a refined artistic taste. Well, I try to find a balance between these two worlds. Sometimes, when work is very stressful, I just need to distract myself, to immerse myself in another world, in this case, the world of colors. Painting gives me a sense of calm and harmony, Megan smiled and, feeling a light blush on her cheeks, sent her interlocutor a funny emoji. I understand, that truly is like a breath of fresh air, Michael agreed. I think so, yes, Megan replied thoughtfully. A surgeon, like an artist, must have a keen sense of harmony and also be able to appreciate the beauty and perfection of the human body. Yes, that's an interesting thought. I've never thought of it that way, Michael responded. After all, the eyes are the mirror of the soul, Megan continued, and an ophthalmologist, by restoring vision, gives a person the opportunity to see the world in all its diversity and all its beauty. I've had many complicated cases, but there's one I'll never forget. It was a boy. He got into an accident and completely lost his vision. We fought for him for a long time. 8 surgeries, rehabilitation, it was all challenging. But in the end, he was able to see. He saw his mother and the sky above. It was incredible. Yes, quite a story. Michael wrote, You're a real hero. Megan smiled again. She felt a lightness and warmth filling her heart. Her conversation with Michael helped her distract herself from painful thoughts and find the strength to move forward. "Oh, come on," Megan replied a little later in the chat. "The real heroes are the patients who believe in themselves and give us doctors the chance to help them." At that moment, the bus started to slow down, and Megan realized she had arrived at her stop. "Sorry, Michael, I have to go," she quickly typed. "Thank you, you've been a great help." "Good luck with the surgery," he wrote. "I'll be waiting for you in the practical course." Megan got off the bus and headed quickly to the clinic. Suddenly, she felt a surge of new energy and hope. Of course, the divorce had been painful, but it hadn't broken her. Megan understood that she needed to move on, to work, to find her happiness. Perhaps this happiness would find her in the form of online communication in the world of colors and heartfelt conversations. After all, life is not just about surgeries and scalpels, but also about colors, tenderness, and the hope for new love. The cold wind greeted Megan at the entrance of the clinic. But now its gusts didn't seem so piercing. Hope was warming her soul. She understood that life is not always simple, and along with everything else, there is also pain and disappointment. But at the same time, there are people ready to support you in tough times, even if they've never seen you before. The microsurgery department was bustling with its usual activity. Nurses hurried around, applying sterile dressings, wheeling carts of instruments, and discussing the latest gossip. Megan threw her bag onto the work desk and headed for the operating room. "Mrs. Megan, hello. Did you know we have a new head starting today?" the duty nurse, a kind-eyed woman, informed her. "It's the director's son, Gabriel Chesterton." Megan frowned. She didn't like changes, especially during such a difficult time. "And where is Gabriel Chesterton?" she cautiously inquired. "In his office," Joanna replied. "He even managed to hold a 5-minute meeting." Megan understood that she had been delayed in court, and she had been asking for permission from the previous head. But something told her that this young man would likely be unsympathetic towards her. She entered the office and saw a tall, slender man in glasses sitting at a large desk, sorting through papers. "Ah, Beecham has arrived." "It's been quite a while," Gabriel said, looking up from the documents. "Such tardiness is unacceptable. You know there's strict discipline in the clinic from today." Megan felt a spark of indignation ignite in her soul. "Mr. Gabriel, I'm sorry, but I was at a court hearing, and I had permission from Mr. Dillon," she replied, trying to maintain her composure. "And what of that?" he snorted discontentedly. "Your personal affairs should not interfere with the clinic's work." Megan pouted her lips in annoyance. Deep down, she could not stand it when someone raised their voice at her, especially without reason. "I understand that discipline is important, but at the same time, I suggest you familiarize yourself with the policy regarding leave in the clinic. This will help us avoid similar misunderstandings in the future." "I don't need your advice, Beecham," Gabriel barked, giving her a disdainful look. "You're a doctor, and your job is to operate, not to engage in legal disputes." Megan turned away and walked towards the operating room. Different thoughts swirled in her head, but she tried to ignore them. Right now, the most important surgery awaited her. Everything had already been prepared. On the operating table lay an elderly man with glazed, cloudy eyes. Alfred, a janitor from the nearby building. His vision had started to decline several years ago. Now, surgery was his only option. Megan was set to perform a vitrectomy on Alfred as his retina had detached. Focusing on the upcoming operation, she forgot everything else in the world. Megan carefully reviewed the examination results and prepared the instruments. After that, she concentrated on her work, pushing thoughts of the court, the divorce, and her unpleasant introduction to the new head out of her mind. In a moment, Megan sank into her world, where only sterile instruments, fine sutures, and the light of the operating lamp existed. She picked up the microsurgical instrument and began. Gently inserting the vitrectomy cannula, she removed the vitreous body from the patient's eye. Under the microscope, In the tiny space, the experienced ophthalmic surgeon could see blood vessels, nerve fibers, and the retina perfectly. "What do we have here?" Megan whispered, as if not noticing the operating room nurse frozen half a meter away. After a moment of hesitation, she began to address the damage with precise movements and performed the retinalization. The surgery lasted about an hour, and when Megan finished, she felt completely drained, yet her soul was calm and satisfied. "You saved my vision, Doctor," Alfred whispered, touching her hand. "Thank you so much. You're my guardian angel." "Oh, it's nothing," Megan smiled. "We're just doing our job." "Yes, that's true, but not everyone can do it with such finesse and skill," Alfred replied, gratefully squeezing her wrist. "You probably know that I'm a janitor. I work outside in all weather. For me, sight is everything." "Thank you, Mrs. Megan." The elderly patient's words, full of sincere gratitude, touched her deeply. There was no arrogance or disdain like Gabriel Chesterton's, only pure human appreciation. Megan smiled, wishing you health, Mr. Alfred, and a speedy recovery. As she left the operating room, she felt overwhelmed with fatigue. She walked into the on-call room, where the new head was talking on the phone at the table. Megan decided to take a short break. Since she had a little time, she pulled out her smartphone and secretly immersed herself in the world of online courses. Once again, Michael became something like a lifeline for her. "Hi," a message from him popped up on the screen. "How are you? How did the surgery go?" "Hi again," Megan replied. "Everything went well. I'm on a break now." "Oh, glad to hear that," he wrote. "Are you going to show me the promised paintings?" "Of course," Megan replied, smiling as she attached several photos of her works to the message. A still life with fruits, oil, a pencil sketch of a dancing couple, an evening landscape, watercolor, these were the titles. Unbeknownst to herself, caught up in the conversation, Megan began to tell Michael about her childhood. About how her mother, immersed in depression, blamed her daughter for all her troubles, while her father struggled with alcohol addiction. "In those tough years, my mom often said I was to blame for her misfortunes," Megan wrote sadly, "that I came into the world to ruin her life." "That's awful," Michael replied. "How could she say that? What about your father?" "Dad?" Megan continued. "He drank often. Sometimes he became aggressive and unpredictable." "And how did you cope with all that?" the man immediately reacted. "It was hard," Megan honestly admitted, "but I had Oliver. A stray cat that appeared in our yard one day. He was the only one who understood me and accepted me as I am. Oliver was thin and dirty, but he always sat next to me. He purred. And I felt that this little cat loved me." "Oliver?" Michael asked, intrigued. "Yes," Megan replied, "he saved me from loneliness. I even drew him once. I still have that childhood drawing. Do you want to see it?" Michael agreed. Megan smiled and attached a photo of her friend, drawn in pencil. "Then Mom divorced Dad," Megan continued, "and strangely enough, life started to improve. I tried to be a good student, helped Mom around the house, and after a couple of years, a new man came into her life, my stepfather. He is the one I owe my love for the medical field to. He was a doctor, a therapist, and he lost his family in a car accident." "Oh, that's amazing," Michael wrote. "You've always tried to be strong, even in tough times." "Thank you," Megan smiled, realizing how quickly time had passed. Soon she was interrupted by the head. "Megan Beecham," Gabriel said, "I need your help with a patient. He has cataracts. Quite extensive. I understand that according to the queue, the surgery should not be performed by you, but it turns out there's no one else available." "Of course, we'll take care of it," Megan replied, trying not to show her embarrassment at being engrossed in the conversation. "Yes, and keep in mind that the procedure is not a simple one," Gabriel added after a moment, "but I believe you will manage. After all, you are one of the best surgeons in the department. By the way, Have you considered offering paid services? You know, a private room in the clinic, a price list? No, I haven't thought about it, Mr. Gabriel. I'm quite satisfied with things as they are, Megan replied without hesitation. The head smirked and gave her a strange look. Megan nodded and stood up from the table. She knew that she was about to fight for the sight of another person. And she would do it. The next surgery turned out to be much easier than the one before. Megan finished quickly and could go home with a clear conscience. Well, not home, of course, but to her rented apartment, where she planned to check out another painting course. Finally, in the comfort of her home, Megan eagerly shared her latest experiences and memories with Michael. As before, he was attentive and sensitive. Megan felt tenderness toward him, like an old, good friend. Then, at some point, she had a strange feeling. She suddenly realized that she didn't know too much about Michael. Michael, she wrote, what do you do for a living? An awkward pause followed. He wrote a few minutes later, I'm an artist, working on my own projects. I see. Where do you live? In a suburban area or the city? Closer to the suburban area, Michael replied a bit evasively. Megan sensed that he had suddenly withdrawn into himself and didn't want to continue the topic. Especially since they had another online art lesson ahead. Sighing sadly, she turned on her computer to view the next painting class. Her fingers aimlessly sorted through the brushes lying nearby. The room was immersed in a cozy twilight, illuminated only by the monitor's screen. The teacher, an energetic man with a spark in his eyes, was talking about perspective and how to convey depth and space on the canvas. Megan watched his confident brush movements with fascination, admiring his lively, insightful explanations. Despite this, her thoughts drifted to the past. To that distant student period when she first met Donald. Memories of her student years, lectures, and late-night shifts at the hospital resurfaced. And he, Donald, her future husband, tall, self-assured economist with sensual lips and an amusing dimple in his chin. Megan, he said during one of the student parties, you know, you're special, beautiful, smart, talented. I want to be with you. And Megan fell in love, for the first time and for a long time, with Donald's confidence, his tenderness, and care. The wedding was magical. A white dress, cheerful guests, endless congratulations. Well, what now, daughter? Her mother-in-law's voice rang out that same evening. Will we live in harmony? Megan smiled. Of course, Mom, I'll try my best. But the perfect picture of family life quickly shattered. The first problems began right away. Megan, her mother-in-law said just a week after the wedding, you must understand, now you are my son's wife. That means you need to behave accordingly. You can't forget your duties. In this family, I am the one in charge and no one else. I love Donald very much and want our family to be happy, Megan protested. Sweetheart, happiness doesn't just depend on your desires, her mother-in-law interrupted her roughly. You must remember your place and respect your elders. What have I done wrong? Megan asked. I just want to be a good wife. A good wife doesn't just love her husband, her mother-in-law lectured, she also takes care of her family's comfort, keeps the house clean, prepares delicious meals, and is always in a good mood. Never forgetting that her husband must come first, followed by work, friends, and everything else. Her mother-in-law's words, like shards of glass, gradually shattered Megan's dream of a happy family day by day. Megan, her mother-in-law said another time, I don't understand why you work so much. What do you do at your job? You're a doctor, not a janitor, yet you look like a cleaner. You probably don't need to be beautiful like I am, right? Men love beautiful women, don't forget that. You have to be perfect, just like me. Then Donald will be happy. A tear slowly rolled down Megan's cheek. Well, she finally received some gratitude. In those words from her blood, she sensed something dangerous and uncompromising. Megan understood that it was useless to oppose Donald's mother, and she would never be able to reach her ideal. Each day, the relationship between the women worsened. Her mother-in-law constantly criticized her, reminding her of her duties and nitpicking every detail. Over time, Megan began to avoid meetings with her mother-in-law, trying to stay out of the house during the day. She immersed herself in work in an attempt to forget her problems. But new challenges awaited her at work as well. And Donald began to change. He became less caring, less attentive. Megan felt their relationship growing cold. "Donald, what's happening?" she asked one day. "Everything's fine," her husband replied irritably. "Don't make things up." Soon, he began to stay late at work frequently and sometimes even spent the night at a hotel. Megan tried not to ask questions, fearing the truth. Perhaps they would have divorced already if she had known. But fate cruelly delayed Megan, granting her a long-awaited pregnancy with 2 cherished lines on the test. At that moment, she momentarily drifted away from the lesson on the screen and recalled her pregnancy. The first weeks had been tough. Nausea, dizziness, and morning sickness tormented her without respite. "Megan, you're just faking it," her mother-in-law said. "No need to pretend, we're not in a theater." "Mom, could you at least help Megan?" Donald asked somewhat reluctantly. "Why?" "She just wants attention. Besides, you need to work more, not take care of her." "I told you, this girl is not right for you." "Mom, but she's pregnant," Donald repeated. "And so what? Every woman gives birth, and that's that. There's no need to make her out to be disabled." Megan silently endured the insults. Of course, deep down, she wished Donald would protect her from his mother's attacks. But he was silent as a stone. Suffering from morning sickness, Megan felt lonely and abandoned. "Mrs. Charlotte, I feel so awful," she complained to her doctor. "That's normal," the gynecologist replied. "Many women experience those symptoms in the first trimester. But I feel so bad I can't do anything. And I'm a medical professional myself," Megan objected. "Try to rest more, eat right, and take walks," the doctor advised. Gradually, the morning sickness faded, and Megan even began to enjoy her condition. Feeling the new life growing inside her, she talked to her baby and even read him fairy tales. But new problems arose as her pregnancy progressed. Megan was diagnosed with placenta previa, significantly complicating the prognosis for delivery. "Megan Beecham, you need to prepare for a cesarean section," the on-call obstetrician said. "What?" she exclaimed in fear. "I want to give birth naturally." "Unfortunately, that's not possible," the doctor replied. "This situation is simply dangerous for both you and the baby." The delivery was difficult. Megan endured for several hours, experiencing clinical stress. The pain was unbearable. "Blood pressure is dropping, heart rate is increasing," the doctor announced during the delivery. "Emergency cesarean section is required." A few hours after the surgery, Megan finally saw her son. Little Arthur was so tiny and defenseless. "Congratulations. Your son is completely healthy," the neonatologist said with a smile. But the joy of her son's birth was replaced by an overwhelming sense of loneliness. Neither Donald nor his mother showed the slightest desire to help her. They were absorbed in their own affairs and interests. Left alone with her baby, Megan realized she would have to handle everything by herself. And she was right. She realized this very soon when her milk dried up. At the same time, there was a severe shortage of infant formula in the stores. But Megan overcame all the difficulties. She raised her son practically alone, without the help of her husband or mother-in-law. A lot of water has flowed since then. Her mother-in-law was taken by a cunning heart attack, and Donald completely lost his mind, tying his life to a young woman. Lost in her memories, Megan completely forgot that she was in class. When she finally came back to reality, the instructor had already finished his lecture. "Sorry," Megan typed in the group chat, "I got a bit distracted and didn't rate the lecturer." "No worries," Michael quickly replied on behalf of everyone, "the main thing is that you're with us." "Thank you," Megan wrote back, "you have no idea how much you helped me." After receiving a response in the form of a friendly emoji, she decided to go to sleep. It had been a challenging day, and it felt immensely long. The next day after the court hearing, Megan arrived at work. Everything started as usual, in a familiar rhythm. Patient examinations, consultations, preparations for surgeries. The smell of antiseptics, the sterile shine of instruments, the quiet whispers of nurses, and the monotonous hum of equipment filled the air. But closer to noon, a patient injured in a gas explosion at a cafe was brought into the department. A young man with a burned face and hands was in a semi-conscious state. He was transported on a stretcher amid the sounds of a wailing siren. "Doctor, urgently," cried a nurse, pointing to the injured man. "What happened?" Megan asked as she passed by the operating table where a prepared patient was already lying. "Gas explosion in a local cafe. He carried a child out of the fire and suffered severe injuries himself. It's a miracle he survived. They say he's a local homeless man living on the dump and working as a garbage collector." "Critical corneal burn," said a young resident doctor as he approached Megan, "and multiple shrapnel wounds to the face." But Megan was already examining the patient herself, quickly assessing the extent of the injuries. The burns on his face and hands were extensive, but her attention was drawn to his eyes. They were covered with a film that looked like wet glass. "This is serious." "Let's get started," Megan commanded. In the operating room, in an atmosphere of sterile cleanliness where it smelled of alcohol, iodine, and anesthetics, a team was working. Megan examined the patient's eyes again and performed a biomicroscopy to determine the extent of the damage. The cornea had been damaged due to thermal exposure, and there were burns on the eyelids. Urgent keratoplasty and burn therapy were necessary. "We need to administer antibiotics immediately and a blood transfusion," Megan ordered. For an hour, she dedicated herself entirely to doing everything possible to save the young man's eyesight. She worked on his eyes like a sculptor, repairing the damage and restoring the tissues. After the surgery, she found a smartphone in the clothing pocket of the homeless man. It was slightly damaged but still functional. Megan examined the screen closely and suddenly felt warmth in her heart. The wallpaper displayed a painting, a landscape in vibrant colors. She recognized it. It was the still life with sunflowers that she had seen in her online painting course. This still life was simply exquisite. And it was painted by Michael, her unexpected friend from the art community. Megan brought the old smartphone closer to her face. The screen lit up with familiar messages. It was definitely him, her anonymous friend. Megan glanced again at the man, his battered face, and realized, before her was Michael. For the first time during their correspondence, she was overwhelmed by conflicting feelings. Surprise, fear, and, of course, pity. And also an indescribable joy at their meeting. Even if it was under such circumstances. "Please find out his details," Megan ordered while applying a special burn ointment with antibiotics to the patient's eyes, and locate his relatives. It soon became clear that Michael was the homeless man who collected trash at the dumps and lived on the outskirts of the city. He had saved a boy from the fire at the cafe and now needed help himself. It turned out that the child Michael rescued from the fire was the grandson of Judge Joanna Carrington, the very same judge who had ruled in favor of Megan's husband. Frankly, the judge was shocked by what had happened. She couldn't believe her grandson was in such a situation. When she heard about Michael, the judge was astonished by his courage and selflessness. In that moment, Joanna wanted to thank him and asked Megan to do everything possible to save the man from blindness. "Doctor," Joanna said, standing in the hallway next to Megan, "I want to help this person. He saved my grandson, and I can't leave him in trouble." "We're doing everything we can to save his eyesight," Megan replied, "but the burns are very serious." "He's a homeless man," Joanna whispered. "How could he have painted such beautiful pictures?" "He's an artist," Megan corrected her, "and very talented. He has golden hands. And he's a true hero." At that moment, Megan realized why Michael hadn't wanted to talk about himself. He was hiding behind anonymity. He was ashamed of his life. Yes, he is indeed talented, the judge agreed, and a kind, brave man as well. By the way, my brother-in-law is a fairly wealthy businessman, so he will definitely help Michael. Not only with his treatment, but also with subsequent rehabilitation. And personally, I'm sorry that things turned out the way they did in court. My advice to you is to file for an appeal. Don't forgive your husband. Megan nodded, meeting the judge's gaze. Subsequently, she performed a series of eye surgeries on Michael. She applied the most modern methods of burn therapy, used membranes to restore the cornea and vascular layer, and conducted photodynamic therapy. Slowly but surely, Michael's vision began to recover. When he woke up after the anesthesia, the first thing he saw was Megan's kind, caring face. "Hello," he whispered with a weak voice. "Hi, Michael," she replied. "How are you feeling? It's a shame you didn't finish the courses. But it's okay, you'll catch up. I think the organizers will make an exception for such a talented person." He smiled and, at that moment, realized that Megan was the woman he had been communicating with online, the doctor who had saved his life. He finally understood that she was his guardian angel. Michael spent several days in the department under the watchful eye of Megan and her colleagues. She devoted all her free time to him. While Michael was being treated and couldn't paint, Megan read books to him, shared stories about her life, and listened to his. That's how she learned that Michael was an orphan who had lived in a shelter since early childhood. He had taught himself to paint, dreaming that one day his artwork would be noticed. After graduating from the shelter, he tried to live a normal life, but his wife betrayed him, and he ended up back on the street. When Michael turned 40, he decided he could no longer live the way he had. For that, he saved money for several months to pay for courses and even bought a used smartphone for this purpose. You're a wonderful artist, Michael. Your talent deserves recognition. Don't give up on it. Let me help you, Megan offered. How? The homeless man asked with disbelief. I know several galleries that might be interested in such work, Megan replied. I'll help you organize an exhibition. Are you serious? Michael said, struggling to speak. Of course, she smiled. You deserve a better life. Megan couldn't help but notice how he looked at her. In the man's gaze, there was not only gratitude but also a tenderness, an interest that she interpreted as the beginning of a bright feeling. I've always dreamed of having my paintings exhibited somewhere, Michael said one day, but I knew it was impossible. I'm just a worthless homeless man who couldn't live a normal life after my marriage. Don't say that. You're wrong, and you deserve recognition, Megan said. She had become a source of hope and support for him. Sometimes it even seemed to her that she had fallen in love with Michael, with his kind eyes, talent, and soul as pure as a tear. Soon the test results arrived. Michael's corneal condition was slowly but surely improving, and soon he would be able to see. On the day of his discharge from the hospital, Michael gave her a painting, a landscape of an autumn forest. It was filled with many golden and red hues, as if reflecting the colors of autumn and Megan's mood. This is for you, he said. Thank you for everything. A month flew by like a day. Megan, immersed in work, tried to distract herself from her emotional turmoil. She slept little, practically lived at the hospital, but thanks to her professionalism and love for her job, she managed to be attentive to her patients. She was preparing for the appeal and, together with Frank Barlow, was carefully reviewing new case materials. On the day of the reconsideration, the courtroom was filled with a tense atmosphere once again. Donald, seeing his ex-wife, curled his lips in contempt. Whitney, just like last time, sat beside him, her gaze filled with arrogant confidence. The case of Megan Donald Beecham regarding the division of jointly acquired property during the marriage is being heard, the judge proclaimed. Megan tried not to look at Donald, focusing instead on her lawyer, who clearly and persuasively stated their position. Your Honor, Frank Barlow began, we believe that the decision of the court of first instance is unjustified. During the marriage, the parties acquired significant property, including, he listed apartments, dachas, cars, bank accounts, and securities. It is unlawful to exclude the plaintiff's shares from the list of jointly acquired property. Therefore, the arguments presented by the defendant do not meet the requirements of current legislation. In his speech, the lawyer referred to articles of the Family Code and provided numerous quotes from judicial practice. This time, his voice was more confident, and his speech was clear, logical, and legally impeccable. He expertly dissected all the nuances of the case, providing evidence for Megan's claims. Donald's face showed that he clearly did not expect such a turn of events. His prestigious lawyer tried to refute Frank Barlow's arguments, but they sounded quite unconvincing. "Your Honor, allow me." Whitney interjected rudely. "I believe Megan Beecham's behavior during the marriage." "Please stop," the judge interrupted her. "Your remarks are irrelevant to the case." Donald, trying to maintain his composure, began mumbling incoherent phrases that could not refute the facts presented by Frank Barlow. Whitney, sitting next to him, lost her bravado and looked bewilderedly at her hapless lover. During the arguments, Frank Barlow not only clearly and persuasively stated Megan's position but also revealed contradictions in the defendant's testimony. Considering the evidence presented, the lawyer concluded, "We ask the court to fully grant Megan's claim." The court retired to the deliberation room. Megan stared at the closed door, her heart pounding in her chest like crazy. It felt as if time had stopped. She remembered everything she had been through in the last month, her husband's ruthless betrayal, the shame of divorce, and the feeling of loneliness. Silence fell in the courtroom. Everyone waited anxiously for the decision. Considering the evidence presented, the judge began. Returning from the deliberation room, the court has decided to overturn the decision of the first instance and grant the appeal of Megan Beecham. The jointly acquired property will be divided as follows. Megan listened to the judge as if in a dream. It took her a moment to realize that she had won. Frank Barlow smiled, and Donald jumped from his seat. His face was distorted with anger and helplessness. Whitney silently stood up and left the courtroom. Megan felt a wave of joy wash over her. She had achieved justice and managed to protect her rights. She left the courtroom as a victor. And not alone, but together with Michael, whose eyes were hidden behind dark protective glasses. Soon after, changes also occurred at the clinic. The head of the department, Gabriel Chesterton, was caught taking bribes and abusing his power, and Megan took his place. Now she was no longer just a doctor but the head of the department. And despite the many complex issues she would have to tackle, she was full of strength and energy. Soon, Michael's life changed as well. Thanks to the help of the father of the boy he had saved, he received a substantial grant to study in the workshop of a renowned artist. Megan and Michael spent the rest of the autumn and winter together. She helped her chosen one prepare for an exhibition, where his paintings eventually made a splash in artistic circles. Thanks to this, the former homeless man began earning good money and rented a small apartment. Megan and Michael lived a full life. They walked, went to theaters and museums. At that time, Megan realized that her life had gained new meaning. She loved Michael for his pure soul and talent. And he also taught her to see the world through different eyes. Yet, Michael never forgot about his past life. He helped his homeless friends, painted pictures, sold them, donating the money to charity, and after a couple of years, he became a famous artist without losing his soul. Megan and Michael were happy. They found each other in the most difficult moment of their lives, and their love, like a bright ray of light, broke through the darkness of misfortune and granted them hope for a bright future. Shortly before her birthday, Megan learned that she would become a grandmother. Arthur had tied the knot in his third year of university. The young couple looked to the future with optimism and knew that with a grandmother like Megan, they had nothing to fear.